Do you believe in the people's capacity to run themselves, or do you believe that people that are capable are the ones that have to lead the people?
That's an interesting debate, and actually a very current debate in political science. So I firmly believe in the capacity and the ability of people to run their own affairs. As a matter of fact, even I would formulate even stronger. I think you cannot decide for me what's best for me.
You did also mention the aspect of representatives, politicians, and whether or not they should be, always just these career politicians, or should we have more of the average person being willing? In general, I'm not against that idea, because everybody, within the constitutional framework of what qualifies you to be an elected official, be a certain age, be an American citizen. For the most part, for federal elections, for local, you can be, of course, as long as you're a citizen, you don't have to be nationalized from here or born here, so to speak. But there are certain parameters to put in place, and anybody has the opportunity to be put on that, elected official, put on that ballot. However, I think the current sentiment of politicians is so negative and so dire. It does take a very special individual to, one, have the intelligence to do it, but also have the charisma, have the mental fortitude, and have the leadership qualities to do it. So you say that other people should do it. I just don't think other people want to do it. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is an old debate. People say, well, participation is too much work. I want to do something else with my Saturday evenings. And I understand that, however, at the same time, I think a big chunk of what we're facing, a big part of our sort of democratic crisis, is a crisis of representation. I do think that we have politicians who, and there's actually political science research on this, who show that, the preference of the people who elect them and what they end up doing do not really overlap. So we have a system where what matters is you get elected, and once you're elected, you're sort of shielded. So I think we have to really hone in and think about representation, and if we really need the system to look like this. And, I think there is some hopeful experiences at the local level again with, city councils, with, people getting involved in politics directly. And I also, there's some interesting work out there on, sort of randomly selecting people and exposing them to information, and then to let them talk about things and then make decisions. There's some international experiences where they have drafted constitutions like that in places like Mongolia and Iceland and Ireland, and even in Canada in some regions there, where average people were able to go get exposed to information, discuss things, and then make decisions. And these decisions ended up being good decisions. So, I think representation is a problem, because it's hard to think how one person can represent the will of over 100,000 people in this country. I'm a married man. I don't feel confident I can even represent the will of one person, my wife, whom I know very well. But imagine, representing that many people. How should that even go? I mean, it's a problematic thing. So I think we need to think more about how can we get directly involved, have more debate, have more direct participation, and limit the terms of representative. A whole lot of things would get much better if we would say, well, you can get elected once and that's it. That's what the Romans did, Roman Republic. That's an old lesson. Don't let people get, they did two things. They said you can only get elected once. And after you step down, it's only 1 year. And after you step down, you will be held accountable for what you have done while in office. Those two things already would improve our system quite a bit, I think.
I will say, so you mentioned a few things there that are interesting to me. So when it comes down to individuals, when they're elected and put in front of people, for the most part, I think I'm thinking in the terms of mostly more local type of elections versus the federal one, because that's a whole different behemoth. But if we're talking about people who are representing people, actually, these typically are your local representatives, and that's probably the position you have the most likely chance to actually potentially get elected. There are some positions I found out in regard to my Ohio elections where someone ran, there's nobody else running. He just ran and he just got the position.
Well, so right now, the primaries in Texas, yes.
Yeah, it's very possible. It's just like, are you aware? So there's two things that I'm considering when it comes down to people who do not adhere to what the people want. there could be two plausible reasons. One, it's because politics is very complicated in the sense that you have to compromise with other people. So you can't do things. That's kind of the conversation of the filibuster in regards to Congress, where people are getting very upset because we want these democratic policies, but because of the filibuster, it's literally preventing us. So we have to remove certain things to compromise to get things pushed through. So in that retrospect, you can kind of understand, it's like they're trying, but the system is preventing them because they're also representing other people who don't want what you want. So that's kind of an interesting calculation you have to consistently make. And then there's the other aspect where they're just individually greedy and that they just acquired power and they're just a piece of shit. So, I mean, we already know we shouldn't pick those people.
Well, you're right. Sure. I mean, it's interesting point you raise, because I do think we have created systems where sort of the meanest and most cutthroat people end up succeeding, which, we should rethink that. How is it that we have created these sort of weird incentive structures that, a nice person, an honest person, a truthful person will not make it in politics? There's something wrong with that. But I think there's also something wrong with the whole idea that we can just hand over our communal and, political affairs, our community affairs to other people and hope for the best and hope that they figured it out for us. I think that whole idea, this premise of sort of very basic premise of liberalism, that we can take care of our own business and have some professionals take care of our communal life, that seems to be, in my mind, running its course, and that it hasn't worked out. It's not because they're necessarily bad people. It's that once you're in power, once you're there, you're going to try to, you spend some time learning how this all works. Then you're going to try to get reelected. So you're going to spend your time talking with lobbyists, talking with donors, and you're going to try to stay in power and say those things that get you reelected. So there's an incentive structure in place that's not really contributive to our common good. So I think we need to find ways as people to sort of bring back politics to our own lives, and it's not going to be pleasant, but maybe we have all this money in this country. This is the richest country in the world. We actually could afford to say, okay, you're going to get paid for 3 days. You're going to spend 3 days in DC. You're going to learn you're going to be exposed to this question that's up that we have to decide on. And we're going to have a sort of a representative sample of citizens. We got old people, black people, white people, native people, whoever is affected by this there. We're going to split you up, let you talk about this and see what you think. That actually has worked. In different places. And I think, that there are some possibilities there.
But at the end of the day, it's really about, we spoke about it before, it's about participation, the willingness to get involved. For something like this, I don't think it's a circumstance where the system itself is at fault. It's just the system itself is not preparing the people to be involved in the system. Right. And I think that really comes from the more educational component. There was a detachment and realization that people were going to become very much detached in terms of understanding how the government works, being involved in the systems themselves, and really just passing that along to the people that already are running a system that has been very dominant for a very, very, very long time. If we implemented it in a way where education explicitly incorporates people right into the structure, and what I mean by that, why can't we have something where kids are learning at a very young age? This is how you vote. This is the governmental structure. It's not that hard, I'm be honest, to understand these simple concepts. Why can't we have a situation where we're having field trips to like certain like governmental building or city councilmen, especially since a lot of these schools are local focused anyway. A lot of these schools are funded based off the property and the the neighborhoods around them. Why can't we have those schools have these kids be much more knowledgeable in terms of the area they're in? Most people don't move from their area in the first place. So if people are aware of this, or people are aware of the impact, the how everything plays and connects to each other, that should matter. It's just we teach them some basic stuff that nobody cares about in terms of like algebra 2 or Shakespeare. No shit to Shakespeare, but like who cares about Shakespeare once you're like 13? Nobody. Let's be honest.
But I think you're right, Red. I think, Redel, you're right. I think, there's two levels of conversation here. One is which is, of course, you're more involved in sort of practical American politics right now, which is important, and I think you're right. There's no reason why this country couldn't afford to say, well, let's make sure that our kids learn about politics and make field trips and visit the centers of power, and this becomes an open, transparent system for everybody, so everybody knows what this is all about, which would sort of tighten the space and not leave space for all these conspiracy theories once people understand how this works. I think that's an important component. This is about restoring sort of what they normally call the sort of the knowledge commons, libraries, civic education, exposure, trips, all of that. I think this country can afford this. There's no reason, Trump recently said that he's willing to pay like $100,000 to everyone in Greenland. I mean, if you take that money, you can afford this in this country. The money is there to do something like that. I think that's perfectly fine. The other part of this is sort of a more structural sort of taking a step back and thinking about, okay, is this whole thing viable on the long run? And I think that's sort of part of my job, to sort of explore and research options and opportunities. And like I said, this is not necessarily practical. The practical part comes in how can we apply this? How can we scale it up? How can we do, what they do in Vermont at a larger scale, where people get more involved and learn and more knowledgeable? And it seems like we have the money, and we just have to pay people for it. If you take 3 days off your job, we're going to pay you. In Switzerland, they have two regions in Switzerland where they do practice direct democracy, and they publish the agenda up front. They expose the people to what's going to be discussed, and they pay for their train ticket. Trains are free that day. They all come in, and then they meet and they talk about this. So this is possible at a smaller scale. And if you then decentralize it and have sort of a federal system that doesn't stop at the state level but goes further down, then you can do something like that. So that's sort of the larger scale analysis that I think. Yeah.
So in that situation, because that's what I was wondering, the only reason why I propose what I propose is it's the most seamless way to get people prepared to be a part of the system, because education is something everybody has to do. The incentive is not necessary. You have to be a part of it, and then you're growing into a circumstance where you're already prepared to be a part of the system that is. Now, in your situation, which I was curious about, is like, what will be the incentive structure? Now, you didn't name something that was very interesting, in the sense that, there could be something regarding pay. Potentially, you can get some money. I always advocate for voting day, election day should be a holiday federally, and everybody should have the full day to vote whenever they feel like. Yeah. I don't know why it's not a holiday, but it
is in many countries. It is in many countries. This is rare that it's on a regular weekday. In Germany or in other countries I have lived, this is a holiday and it's a weekend, so people can go.
It just makes sense at the end of the day, but there should be things in there that incentivize and make it easier for people to be involved in the system. But even in like in a pay boost, and even if it, or not pay, like maybe a bonus or something like that, and maybe with information transparency, because that's the other thing that seems like you were advocating for, and I'm on board, because I do think it's very hard to understand what's going on in your local politics. Even me, when I'm researching and I have the internet, I'm like, bro, what actually is going on in Ohio? It took me forever to figure out what is actually going on. I do think those two things are very important and will be transformational in terms of involvement and participation. But I just don't see the larger vision in terms of being so involved to the point where you are able to, or willing to like transform the local area, because that's much more intricate, takes a lot more effort, and it's a job. It's a second job, so to speak.
Right. So, again, in sort of very pragmatic terms of what's possible right now and what we can do to improve our democracy in this country, I think you're right. Education, is a very important piece to it. This comes down to how can we, again, if you frame this and you think about it theoretically, this is about how can we diminish the gap that separates the rulers from the ruled, right? How can we limit the power of those that rule us, and how can we empower those that are being ruled so they can understand what's going on and also participate more on an equal footing? And you're right. I mean, I have worked in social projects. I was a social worker before, and people don't participate if there's nothing to decide, if it's just a waste of time. So this has to be real. You're not going to go, and I wouldn't go anywhere just to sit around and debate things, and then at the end of the day, someone else makes a decision. But I have seen in my own work, that if you are able to decide things that actually affect you, people will go. If you know that my voice will actually have an impact, if you feel that, the people will have an incentive to go. So I think diminishing, the power of the rulers by maybe diminishing their terms, by holding them more accountable, and then raising the people up so they can participate more and understand it more, and then create forums where they can make decisions for themselves at the local level. I think that's a good recipe. And I don't think it's so utopian. I think this is entirely possible.
Yeah, so there is actually, so I think I've spoke about this before. I don't see why, with the implementation of the internet, and it's becoming one-to-one now with politicians. I think people are realizing that is very important. That I know there's this new conversation because of certain people on certain aisles of the political spectrum where they're saying, "Oh, we want to only vote in person, whatever." But in regards to the internet, what it provides is it provides the opportunity for very quick and very immediate feedback. And I do think there is something to that in terms of people know like referendums exist, but hey, I want to know your thoughts on using the money for approving this homelessness project, and then an email sent out to every resident in that area to get their thoughts about it, so you get very quick and immediate feedback to everybody, every single person. So I think something like that should be implemented. It would have very quick and like very direct thoughts, and the person themselves, another important aspect, they can't detach themselves from the decision that was made. You're involved now. You can't just blame the representative because things don't go away.
Right.
No. So you have a part in playing on what is decided. So I do think there's something to that for sure.
I agree with you. I think, this doesn't seem to be a problem of, of possibilities of logistics. I think these can be solved. I mean, we're solving much more complex problems, because we have the technology. It seems this is a problem of political will. And it goes back to this idea of the rulers and the rule, because the more you empower people to actually make decisions, the less you leave for those who have been elected to make these decisions. And that becomes a dispute and of who has the power to decide what. So I think that there is no political will there, because why would you want that if you are elected and if you have this possibility to decide that? So I think this is not a logistic problem. This can be done. We are able to vote for American Idol and whatever else, real quickly.
Oh, right, that's a fact. Yes.
Yeah. So this seems not a good excuse for not doing this. I think this is a lack of political will that we see here.
Now, you did bring up something else that you're referring to in terms of like accountability for the individuals, and I agree to that. Like, for example, in Ohio, you can run for the most part for certain positions as much as you want, but you can't run consecutive terms. There probably should be a limit for certain people in positions that the only reason why you're getting elected is because people know your name. Like, there is something to just name recognition that get people elected versus you're actually doing things that's good for the country. I mean, for Ohio, we have this huge scandal of corruption with an energy company of one of the career politicians. So there's something to be said there. However, do you believe in, and this is more, I guess, a potential philosophical difference, do you believe in the people's capacity to run themselves, or do you believe that people that are capable are the ones that have to lead the people? Like, you don't technically have to pick one side or the other, but I do think there's something to that allows the flourishment of society.
That's an interesting debate, and actually a very current debate in political science. So I firmly believe in the capacity and the ability of people to run their own affairs. As a matter of fact, even I would formulate even stronger. I think you cannot decide for me what's best for me. That's not democracy. That's tutelage. That's you tell me what I need to do. I think the whole foundation of democracy is that people decide for themselves what they want to do. And and if some specialists don't like that, then so be it. At the end of the day, a democratic system means it's the people who make the decisions. And even if you have a specialist who makes better decisions, if that were the case, then we would actually have specialists in politics, which we don't. If you look at the people who are in Congress, they're not like, look at the people who are right now secretaries of things. It's not like they've been trained in that field. We have people who are running health systems and they don't have no training in health. Or we have people in security stuff, they have no training in security. So we don't have a specialist system to begin with. But we also don't have a system where we sort of rule ourselves. And I think the discontent that we're feeling in the world right now, not just in the United States, is that this has gotten out of our hands, that we are being run by other people, by systems that we no longer control. So I think that's really a shared sentiment that I perceive in my research.
And I'm not mad at that feeling. I will say this is probably a philosophical difference because I'm not as convinced that people have that capacity in general. I do believe in the Chiefs and the Indians kind of metaphor because no matter how much knowledge someone knows or no matter how logical they may be, I do think there's an innate emotional instinctual behavior that can create flaws in their character, and I think this manifests more in certain people than other people. I do think there are certain qualities for a leader that is necessary. However, I do think our system is not really pushing those leaders there. They're just pushing the individuals that are able to lie, manipulate, fool you to think that they actually care about you. There needs to be more accountability. Leaders, you have too much power to not be more accountable.
I think, this is, again, a very old discussion, and I hear what you're saying. There's going to be people who are more invested, they're more, they have more interest, they're more inclined towards it. But I think the beauty of democracy, and I think you see this in the founding fathers even, is to believe that ordinary people, when they come together and have a chance to talk about things and deliberate, they're able to make good decisions. This might not be the best decisions, but these are the most democratic decisions. And, there's a basic understanding that, making someone live under a rule where you did not have a say in, that you have no voice in making the rule, and you still have to live under that rule, that's a problem for democracy. In a true democracy, you would say, I have a say in this, and this might not be the best decision, and democracy might not be the system where you get the qualitative best decisions, but at least it's our decisions, we live by them, and we revise them if we don't like it, if we have a chance. But right now, what you're saying is also true. We don't have an education system that supports that, and we don't have the mechanisms that allow people to actually participate that way. So then we sit back, watch TV, and hope for the best, and that's not really working out, it seems.
It's not. This might be a conversation for a future day, because I do think there's something interesting about that aspect and what it truly entails. But ultimately, I do think, and I agree to this aspect, that in a system that is America, everyone should get their voices heard. Everyone should vote. I advocate that very consistently. Everyone should advocate. Everyone should be involved. Everyone should be informed. All these things I do think holds true, and I do think in general it would create better outcomes. But I do also believe in the republic aspect, that there are certain people that can manifest these ideals better than others. But conversation, I would say, for a different day, because there's other things that you said that I do want to engage with before our conversation's over. And you mentioned legal duty. Now, I heard that you say this in the TED Talk too, and I have no idea what that means. So I'm curious for you to explain that.
Well, it doesn't exist, right? This is an idea that, I was, there's a lot of literature on jury duty, and I have not been called to jury duty. I became a citizen some years back, but since then I haven't been called to jury duty. But I think there's a beauty in something where people are, this idea of random selection, average citizens getting called to experience what governance is. And in this case, the judicial, but, my proposal would be, well, why not think about this and extend this to lawmaking, to the lawmaking process? Why not call on people similar, in a similar system as we have in legal duty, so they get exposed to politics and they get together to talk about, laws that need to be drafted, that need to be proposed, that need to be decided on. Why can't we not try that? Why not have a system that combines sort of local direct participation with you being called, not just at the national level, but also internationally. I would love to spend a few days in the UN, where I'm exposed to the information, and then I deliberate with some people. And this is a sort of a group of also randomly selected citizens, average citizens, and they get together and talk about this and make a decision. That way, we would all in our lifetimes not be called upon too much, but maybe once to experience this, to learn about it. And there is some research, people who do jury duty, they come out reading more, being more informed, being more interested in politics, reading more, local news once they have done jury duty. So this jury duty thing was inspiring to me. And I just, this is a proposal that doesn't exist right now. So it's just It's one of these utopias, right? So we need new utopias, right?
So if I were to manifest that into something substantive that I do think would make a lot of sense in our current system, is people don't realize that there are some, I'm sure people have seen like congressional hearings and type of meetings, or just seen some city council meetings, and there's just a bunch of people in a big room just talking about something, and maybe there's a like cross-examination for a witness or whatever, but there's just a bunch of people in a room just talking about whatever they're talking about.
Right.
Now, of course, there's a lot of legalese and a lot of stuff that people may not know, but I don't see a reason why there can't be, especially since all these are public, like everybody can be there for them, or at the very least everybody can see it. I see no reason why people can't like enter the room. And every now and then these things are very boring, so just one person ask a question, say something right there, get a little bit more involved, like, wait. And sometimes that question could help generalize it to the average person, so the to kind of expand, like, what are you talking about? So
Right.
I do think there's something to be there, because these meetings happen all the time. Just a couple people in there offer their insight could potentially shift the perspective.
Well, Renel, I like that you're very pragmatic about these things, and you think about what can be done right now in this current system to improve it. And you're right. I mean, these meetings are public, but how many people watch C-SPAN? So it's not something that people want to do. But it's also because we don't really have anything at stake. That's what that's when the research comes in. The sort of academic part is say, well, this can only work if we can actually really make decisions for ourselves, and we have to have the courage to sort of change our system so that it would allow for that. I mean, they're trying this out. There's some folks out of Stanford. There's a guy, Fishkin is his name, a professor. This might be a good candidate for your talk. And they do deliberative polling. They have actually coined that term, and they try this out, expose people to information, break them up in small groups, have them discuss. But then when they do it, once they do it, all they come up with is sort of recommendations, and they don't have the power to implement this. But this actually works. It's just that the last step to actually give these people then the power to draft a law and actually pass a law, that's still reserved to professional legislators. So I'm with you. I think this is very laudable that you think about the concrete situations and how it is. And as it is right now, you're right. We can be spectators. We can watch it, and we get bored by it. We don't understand it, but we're not really involved. So why would we understand this better? That's not our business. We have made it the business of some specialists who are badly qualified, it seems, on top of everything.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. The difference between that and jury duty would be you're making a deliberation on whether or not this person's guilty or not. And in something like this, I'd say there might be a level of participation. You could probably ask a question to clarify some bill that's getting proposed, or some like decision that's being made in general for the local area. But when everybody in agreement say aye, you probably won't count as one of the ayes in regards to what is being decided. So there might be something interesting there in terms of I'm sure that could be developed, but I do understand what you're referring to in general. If there was some type of incentive structure that makes them at the very least feel more involved in the decision making itself, that could by default, transitive property, that could spread word of mouth and then therefore interest to the people locally, and to the extent that maybe I should tune in because there might be my friend Joe over there that might have a question about what's going on. Hey, I kind of want to be a part of it. So that could be something that manifests itself into generally more participation.
Yeah. Part of this is also we have created in this framework a system that relies very strongly on rights, particularly our rights to also be private, not to be involved. What we have neglected in all of this is our mutual responsibilities. My responsibility as a citizen with my neighbor, with my community, with other people in this system. And that's not, if we neglect this altogether, we get away from also, we get into this polarization, then everything becomes about us against them, me against my neighbor. But, if we find ways to build in mutual responsibility for each other, and bring the system down away, break this gap between the rules and the rule, then you would think that people also get more involved because they have more at stake. They understand what is at stake. They are there for each other, and they they rein in sort of that power that we now have sort of delegated to other people.
Yeah, and I do think that generally a lot of these people are just like you and me. They're a lot of them are not that much smarter for the most part. Not that,
Really not.
that yeah, it's just they saw an opportunity and went for it. Like there's so many stories of people's like, I felt like I needed to get involved. I went, got involved, got some signatures, and was a representative. It's just you just have to be willing.